Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education, and I'm your host, Tim Bogas. About 3 years ago, my daughter came home from school one day just so excited about this book she had read in art class. Did she remember what she actually did in art class? No, of course not. But man, did she remember that book. And it was The Day the Crayons Quit by Daywalt, and it made quite the impression on her. In fact, she still remembers it to this day, still loves the book. At the time she came home talking about it, I didn't know anything about the book, but I decided I needed to look into it. We bought a copy for the house, and let me tell you, it is amazing. Very cool for kids and pretty entertaining for adults as far as children's books go. There's a lot of subtle humor, and it's a great story by an amazing writer. And the illustrations by Oliver Jeffers are pretty spectacular as well. It's an awesome addition to the art room library, and I know there are just so many art teachers across the country who use the book in their rooms for humor, for lessons, and for inspiration. But the reason I'm telling you this story and all about this book is because I have the awesome opportunity to interview Daywalt on the show today. He is, of course, the author of The Day the Crayons Quit. But what you probably don't know is he actually has an entire Hollywood career outside of children's literature. He's worked as a screenwriter, a director, and a producer. He especially has found a niche making horror films, which is pretty incredible. Like, how do you go from horror films to children's literature and be incredibly successful at both? It took me quite a while to wrap my head around that concept, and I definitely want to see what Drew has to say about that transition. Now, I, of course, have a lot to ask him about, but first, I need to tell you that this whole opportunity, this interview came about because Drew is going to be one of the featured presenters at the 2017 Art Ed Now Winter Online Conference. The conference is happening February 18th, and there's still time for you to sign up. Go check out Art Ed Now and see what it's all about. And at the end of the episode, I will have a discount code for Art Ed Radio listeners. But I think right now, it's time to get to Drew, so let's go ahead and bring him on the show. All right, I am here with Drew Daywalt. Drew, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited to talk to you. And I just kind of wanted to jump in here. I know a lot of people, art teachers in particular, who are listening to this, know you as a children's book author, but they don't know about your work as a screenwriter, a producer, a director. You've especially had a lot of success with horror films, which I find kind of fascinating. So I want to ask you about that. What interests you so much about creating horror films, and how did you get your start there?
It's funny. It all goes back to being about 6 years old. I grew up in Hudson, Ohio, in the town haunted house, and I was the youngest of six. And my older brothers would always let me stay up way too late on Friday nights.
Yeah, nice.
Drink Mountain Dew, watch horror movies, and I was always getting into their comic books because they were always reading like heavy metal and creepy and Tales from the Crypt. And one of my big delights as a kid was to sneak into their collection of comic books and stuff. And they're also at the time, this is, we're going back to the mid 70s, almost into the early 80s. Like they were reading Tolkien and a lot of that. So I had that as one side of my experiences, growing up in a haunted house, watching horror movies with my older brothers and getting into their stash of, like horror magazines and comic books. And then on the other side of the coin, Mom would come home from work and read me Dr. Seuss and Maurice Sendak and Roald Dahl. So
right.
I was constantly being inundated by other worlds, world building, and then in 1977 I saw Star Wars, which made me go, wait a minute, this is fascinating. And a lot of what I do, whether it's either horror or children's lit, comes from that period in my life. I've traced it all back because believe me, I've asked that question too.
Right.
Because when you're that age, on the one side, Santa Claus is real, and the Tooth Fairy is real, and the Easter Bunny is real, and the world is full of magic and wonder and optimism, and you can be anything when you grow up. You could be the Incredible Hulk, you could be, you could fly, you could do all these great things. And then on the other side of the coin, the boogeyman's real. The guy in your closet who's going to come get you when mom and dad leave at night, that guy's real. Every horror movie you watch is a documentary when you're 7. So it's really two sides of the same coin of being that age. And I found that my greatest creativity is when I tap into that part of my childhood.
That's awesome. No, that's a really, really cool story. And I love hearing about all those influences. But if we can dive into the horror movies just a little bit more, you always seem to create these short films that are really intense, really suspenseful. And my question is, why does that specific format of quick storytelling appeal to you? And on a related note, do you think that type of format played a little bit of a role in the success of your YouTube channel? Because it seems like those types of films are almost custom made for an internet audience.
Well, it's funny you say that, because they actually were custom made for an internet audience. I started doing those in 2008, and at the time, things like creepypasta hadn't hit the mainstream yet.
Right.
They weren't there. Or at the time, there was fearnet.com, but there wasn't a lot going on in horror in the internet. And I thought, I bet if I had the time and a little bit of a crew and a budget, I could probably do something scary in 2 to 3 minutes. And at the time, no one had done it, so everybody thought we were crazy, me and my team. And I grabbed the people that I would normally shoot commercials, music videos, features, and TV shows with. I grabbed my team on weekends when we weren't working, and we would shoot these little shorts. And the first one came about when I made a $100 bet with a friend on the East Coast, because he said, look, horror needs time. You need 90 minutes to build suspense and scare somebody. You're not going to be able to do it on the internet.
Right.
Horror is not ever going to be native to the digital world. And I said, I don't think you're right, because at the time there was comedy. I mean, obviously, SNL, Monty Python, Kids in the Hall, The State. There was all these like sketch comedy shows on TV, and then on the internet there was Funny or Die. But no one had done anything really scary yet. And I thought, I think we can scare people in 2 minutes if it's the right thing that's built to be a 2-minute scare. So we did a thing called, the first short we did was called Bedfellows. And I think it's like 1 minute and 45 seconds. And the whole point of it was to, in the same way that a comedy sketch has 2 or 3 big laughs and then you're out.
Yeah.
We wanted to have like one big scare and then get out. And we, at the time, it was back when MySpace was relevant, believe it or not, we posted it on MySpace, and in 24 hours we had 2 million hits.
Wow.
And the guys at MySpace actually called us and said, why didn't you tell us you had a following? And we were like, we didn't have a following. Now we have a following.
Yeah, this is our following.
We just found them today, by the way. Thank you. But yeah, so we just sort of were at the right place at the right time, and we created 40 of these short films.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where initially we were like, let's do this to create a director's reel so that I can do horror features. And then it became about, well, wait a minute, no, these are they're great on their own. I don't know that I want to do a feature anymore.
Yeah.
I think these are great. And it was sort of what was started off as a calling card became the end game for us. And we just really enjoyed making these super short, super tight, scary little videos.
That kind of seems like a strange transition, though. You talked a little bit earlier about living in both worlds, but how did you make that shift going from making horror films to children's literature, books about crayons? Like, how did you become interested in that, and where did that original idea for The Day the Crayons Quit come from?
Well, it all stems back to childhood, like I was saying, but I went to college at Emerson College in Boston, and I was a creative writing major. My concentrations were in screenwriting and children's literature, because at the time, my big plan was, if I really know children's literature and the history of fairy tales and storytelling for kids in a meaningful and deep way, and I also learned screenwriting, I can go and work with Disney, because that was my goal, was to get out here and work with Disney and Warner Brothers and write children's animation for TV and for film. And ultimately, I did do that. I did work at Disney and at Universal writing cartoons for kids. But along the way, I was also getting jobs with like Quentin Tarantino's company, A Band Apart, and Jerry Bruckheimer and Tony and Ridley Scott, Scott Free. And I was writing these sort of action films, and I was fixing a lot of dialogue for movies. And what happened was I was going back and taking the advice of a teacher in college who said, he actually recommended that I not even go to Hollywood. He's like, you have a knack for children's literature. I think you should just go right to that and go to New York. And I was like, no, Jack, I want to go to Hollywood. I don't want to be Dr. Seuss. I literally said that to him. I want to be Quentin Tarantino when I grow up. I don't want to be Dr. Seuss. And he was like, well, that's too bad because, you're not Tarantino, you're Dr. Seuss. But it took a while to get back to that. And really, I had a good run. I had a movie that didn't do as well as I'd hoped in 2002. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those like, throw your hat in the dirt, kick the ground and you quit Hollywood again. And I thought, well, I'm going to go write that book that Jack told me to write. And I was sitting at my desk one night and and I didn't have kids yet. I have kids now, but I wrote this in 2003 before I had kids. Mm-hmm. There was a box of crayons on my desk. Here I was a 33-year-old man with, it's like crayons are so ubiquitous that when you find a box of them or you find a crayon, you don't even know how you got it, when you bought it, or how it got there. There's just crayons in our life. It's like
they're everywhere.
They apparently are just born in drawers. But I thought, well, I'm going to tell a story about crayons because I like it. Grandma likes crayons. Mom and dad like crayons. Teachers like crayons. Kids like crayons. My dog likes crayons.
With some of the insight you have with children's lit, what works for that? What was your original expectation for the day the crayons quit? Did you know that you had something special on your hands? Did you think that it was going to have some of the success that it did?
That's a really cool question because I'm a self-loathing artist. So everything I write, when I think of it, it's brilliant and it's the greatest thing ever. And I've got my hands on the most perfect piece of art ever to grace the world. And then by the time I'm done with it, it sucks. I hate myself. And I've quit 4 times. I don't know. I never know. Like there's a part of me that when I'm doing it, I love it. And then by the time I'm done, I kind of hate everything I do.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, well, I guess I blew this one too,
Yeah.
I'm not objective enough to even say. I actually turn to my wife at times like that. I'm like, is this any good? Or am I doing it again?
You have the sequel published with The Day the Crayons Came Home. Was there any hesitation about doing a second book? Like the self-loathing may play into that a little bit, but sometimes when you have something that is so successful or so special like that, you run the risk of the second part not living up to the original. So can you talk a little bit about the process of putting together the second book and how much those types of thoughts kind of crossed your mind and played into the idea of it?
You already know the answer to this question now. I just gave it to you the last one. I spent a year hating myself. Because I was terrified. I mean, Oliver, my illustrator, and I went round and round about, how are we going to do this? Because, I told my publisher at the time, I was like, that's as good as it gets, by the way. Everything now is downhill. I hope it's okay if I don't make you any money for the rest of my life. But then Oliver and I, they called and my publisher called and wanted a sequel. And, I was like, God, I didn't even think of a sequel. Like, this was supposed to be a one-off. And I never thought, of course, being a self-loathing artist, I was like, well, I didn't expect it to get this far, let alone a sequel. So he was bummed out. The publisher was bummed out because they love sequels and money.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, if you think of anything, call me. And literally just like a few weeks after that phone call, in my robe, had my coffee, it was morning, I'm walking across my living room floor, which has beige carpet on it. I come up to a pile of dog barf. I was like, oh, God, Sam, what did you eat? I'm like, seriously, crayons? And I'm looking at it, and my wife comes in, and she's like, what's going on? I'm like, oh, Sam ate crayons again. He barfed them on the rug. And she's like, oh, I'll get the cleaner. And I'm like, no, wait. That's it. That's brilliant. I'm like, that's my next book. If the other crayons were ticked off about like how they're being used, how mad is that guy? Because he was like broken in half and slimy. And it was like, I couldn't tell if he was burnt sienna or beige. She's like, great. All right. Well, if it's so brilliant, you clean it up. And then she walked away. but I called my publisher and I was like, I think I got the sequel if you're willing to take a risk with me on some dog barf.
And they have a good reaction to that, or was he all about that?
Yeah, apparently the first book was so well received that I could do a second book about dog barf.
Yeah, at that point they'll just take anything, right?
Yeah. But we spent a year on it. And Oliver and I were terrified. We thought, oh, what have we done? Because we had a good thing and we ruined it.
Yeah.
Because, when you do a sequel, I come from movies, so that's kind of the language I speak. I was like, geez, I hope this is Empire Strikes Back and not like, Ghostbusters 2.
I think it was pretty well received. So
yeah,
you ended up all right there.
Thank God.
Your books are literally in art rooms all over the country, and teachers use them for inspiration, for lessons, for projects, and it's one of the most popular books out there for art teachers. So when you think about thousands of teachers and literally hundreds of thousands of kids reading your books and doing art related to your books, what is the message that you would want them to take away? I guess, what lessons do you think we can learn from your books?
It's funny because I avoid lesson telling like the plague, because if I ever try to teach my own kids a lesson, they're like, oh, it's broccoli. I hate this. Well, I want cotton candy. Yeah. It's like kids have a natural aversion to learning sometimes. Especially when you're really forcing it in. So the lessons came organically for me on both of these books. I never set out to say, this is a book about ...
Right.
But the second book, I did have something in there that I did plant that it was fascinating, because I was reading. I was doing a bookstore reading for the day the crayons came home, and we get to the last page where Duncan built the crayons are also weird and melted and screwed up that they don't fit in the box anymore. Yeah. And Duncan builds a new crayon box, and I put my own personal metaphors in there, and I had a little girl at the end of this reading. She was like 6 or 7,
mm-hmm.
And she goes, "I have a question, Mr. Daywalt." And I was like, "Okay." And she goes, "Does that box at the end of the book represent the human heart?" And I was like, what? Did your mom and dad say that to you? And the mom and dad are sitting there shaking their head, no, she's just that kid, Yeah. And I was like, actually, that's kind of exactly what I was talking about. And I said, the human heart can expand to accept everyone if you let it, not to get lessony or,
right.
Maudlin, but, I want kids to walk away with something positive in their hearts, and also entertain them with dog barf. But,
it's a balancing act, right? You need both.
Yeah, the sugar is the dog barf, and then the medicine is teach them something about the human heart, the human condition.
I like it. Just one last question for you before I let you go. What are you working on now, or what's next for you? What do you really want to do in the future as far as projects go?
I got a really cool phone call last summer from Lucasfilm Publishing,
mm-hmm.
and I'm not allowed to talk about it exactly,
okay.
But I'm doing a picture book on the subject of it rhymes with schmarshmores. But it's a picture book about one of the Schmarshmore's characters.
Awesome.
That's kind of bucket list for me because I'm a super Star Wars nerd.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Thanks. Yeah. I also have next up in April is a book called Rock Paper Scissors, and it's it's an epic tale of where the myth comes from, and sort of a superhero origin story about how rock, paper, and scissors met and who they were before they knew each other.
Nice. That sounds really cool. Well, we will be on the lookout for Rock, Paper, Scissors for sure, and the yet-to-be titled book that we can't talk about at all.
Exactly.
So we'll be on the lookout for both of those. So, all right. Well, thank you, Drew, very much for joining me today. It's been great talking to you, and we really appreciate you coming on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that one. It was a really entertaining interview. Drew has a great personality and a great story to tell. And like I said, if you want to hear more from him, make sure you check out our winter conference. Because as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Drew will be one of our featured presenters at the 2017 Art Ed Now Winter Online Conference. The conference is happening February 18th, and you can check it all out at artednow.com. And as Andrew has mentioned in the last couple of episodes, we have a special discount code for Art Ed Radio listeners. Just enter the code LISTENERSSAVE20 at checkout. That's LISTENERSSAVE20, and you will save 20% off the registration price. Now that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did, and I hope you check out Drew's books. The Day the Crayons Quit, The Day the Crayons Came Home, plus Rock, Paper, Scissors, which sounds like it's going to be pretty good when it comes out in the near future. They are great books for you, for your kids, or for your art room. Definitely for some entertainment, and even if Drew isn't big on teaching lessons through his writing, those lessons are undoubtedly present, and your kids will take something from the stories that these books tell. You yourself will probably be able to find some inspiration in there as well. Art Ed Radio is produced by The Art of Education with audio engineering from Michael Crocker. New episodes are released every Tuesday, and you can find all of our archives at artedradio.com. Then, once you binge listen to all those, sign up for our email list or feel free to shoot us a message at radioguys@theartofed.com. We love hearing from you, good, bad, and otherwise, and we are always happy to start a discussion. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.